I would like to introduce the Pan-African Robotics Competition to you now. The main theme of PARC is to inspire STEM in Africa. All right, that is the goal, that is the passion of the organization. Primarily, we use robotics as a vehicle to inspire STEM education and hands-on learning in Africa. PARC has different leagues or categories that we run competitions in, right from the middle school level, which would be junior secondary school, depending on the education system, all the way to university and even beyond to postgraduate professional engineers. Okay, so we have a broad capture of the people at different levels that we try to engage and inspire to do STEM. PARC started, I think, in 2015, and since then has been growing. And the goal is really to continue to expand and have more impact, more reach to more countries on the African continent. Right now, we have over 30 plus participating countries every year across our different categories of competitions. And we have over 1,000 participating students over time, and that continues to grow. And so we're very excited about what's happening in PARC. And this panel series is born out of the Engineers League of the PARC competition. The Engineers League focuses on college, university students, and also graduates, university graduates who are interested in robotics. And the competition is currently ongoing at the moment. The theme for this year is sustainable agriculture. And so the teams are exploring ways to apply robotics to solve agricultural challenges. So agricultural technology, finding sustainable solutions to that. Right now we have this map on the screen. You can see the spread of teams that are participating this year in the Engineers League. We have teams from over 22 countries in Africa. That's very exciting. From West Africa to East to South and a little bit of North Africa. And so it's, we have good spread, and we have teams competing from every part of the continent, this competition this year. A lot of those team members are on this Zoom meeting today. So if you're here and you're participating in PARC today, this year, I'd like to say hello to you and thank you for being here. And this panel discussion today has the goal of trying to expand our perspectives around how robotics and technology more broadly can be used in the area of agriculture in Africa to improve prosperity, productivity, and create more value. Okay. All right, so that is the overall gist of the Pan-African Robotics Competition. You might have noticed that I'm speaking a little slowly. And the intent there is to allow for easier French translation. Okay, so now we're going to move over to having our panelists introduce themselves. And I'd like to just remind our panelists that we would like you to speak as slowly or even slower than I'm speaking right now. Not only speaking slowly, but having breaks or pauses within your sentences, and that makes it easier for Khadija to interpret different. So I know this is hard to do and it requires a lot of practice. So please permit me to interject if we get some feedback from our translator that you are speaking too fast. Okay. All right, awesome. Well, we're getting right into it now. So we have our 6 panelists. I believe we have probably all of them or maybe one missing, but I'm sure we'll be able to catch up as we go along. So panelists, just one thing, please speak slowly. Second thing, while you're speaking, we would appreciate if you could have your video on, and that just allows for more engagement. All right. And if possible, have your video on throughout the session, but particularly when you're speaking. Okay. All right. So I'll just start off with, let me just make sure. I was going to start off with Femi Adekoya, the flying farmer, but doesn't look like Femi is here. Doesn't look like Femi is here. So maybe I'll go on to start with, maybe I'll start with Justine. Okay, I'm sure Justine is here. So I'll start with Justine, and the prompt really is, can you introduce yourself? What is your background? And what do you do? What does your organization do in the area of agriculture? Okay, and we're having about 2-3 minutes time block for that. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mbanisi, for the opportunity. So my name is Justine Orutwa, and I am currently speaking from Nairobi, Kenya. I am the mechanization and IoT engineer at Hello Tractor. And to begin with, I have a background in instrumentation and control systems. But more importantly, I have inclined my skills towards IoT and agricultural mechanization. I also serve as a data analyst in Hello Tractor. And on a broader perspective, Hello Tractor is an Agric company. We have our offices here in Nairobi, Kenya. We have offices in Lagos, in Nigeria. And we are operational in 18 countries in Africa and 7 countries outside Africa. Our main aim at Hello Tractor is to provide access to mechanization services to farmers, smallholder farmers, corporate farmers, large-scale farmers through an innovative platform that we have put into place, a mobile-based application and a web version of it that allows farmers to access mechanization services through equipment sharing, and also to enable individuals who own tractors to be able to have an asset management platform whereby they can effectively and more profitably run their tractor contracting business, since it enables them to monitor and to be accountable at the end of the day for what their assets are doing. And so through that, we also we have set foot more into agricultural mechanization by providing tractor services to farmers through our platform, and also providing climate resilient agricultural practices that is knowledge-based through capacity building with other non-governmental organizations across Africa and outside Africa. So that is Hello Tractor in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Justine. I've been a big fan of Hello Tractor for a while, and so it's exciting to hear what your company is working on, and I will definitely get into more details around how you approach providing more access to mechanization in this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
How about we go on to have Frank introduce yourself, again, background, what your organization does in the agriculture space. Please remember, speak slowly and have pauses in your sentences. Thank you.
Yeah, hello. Can you all hear me?
Yes, you're coming loud and clear. Okay.
All right. A very good afternoon and good morning to some of your panelists and various parts of the world. It's an honor to be here and to also share my experience. My name is Frank Khalid Limann, and I'm the CEO and founder of Khalmax Robotics and Greenmatics. We are a Ghanaian, so for Khalmax Robotics, we are a Ghanaian STEM education or EdTech company. Basically, we train students from the basic level all the way to the junior high and the university level in robotics, mobile app development, basically STEM education. And we achieved that by establishing robotics clubs in schools where we undertake the training process. So students enroll in a robotics club and then we give them training. So the whole experience started with Khalmax Robotics. And usually that's very similar to the Pan-African Robotics Competition, what you guys do. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Hello. Yes, so, you know, when we engage the kids in STEM robotics and all of that, we organize, annually, we organize these robotics competitions. And then one of the competitions, one of the kids, or one of the schools, we actually mentor them and they built this seed planting agricultural robots, just more like a prototype. So that was when the idea came for Greenmatics, because when we saw that project, I think they pitched it in a competition and, you know, they won a couple of prizes here and there. Then we took it as a company to say, you know what, maybe we could develop this project or this product to another level. Then the idea of Greenmatics started. So actually Greenmatics was birthed from Khalmax Robotics, the experiences we had in our training programs, because we felt that aside education, robotics should be able to influence and affect various sectors of our daily lives, maybe health, construction, agriculture. So we took that task on, and then the idea, so we first of all started with this desktop research on agricultural robots, and that was when the idea started coming. And then it gave birth to Greenmatics. Now, what is Greenmatics? Greenmatics is an agri-tech, it's a Ghanaian agri-tech company. It specializes in developing solar-powered AI, solar and AI-powered agricultural robots for farm mechanization. So the idea is to simplify and reduce the labor cost, as well as the strenuous nature of farm labor in Africa. You know, majority of the things such as seed planting, fertilizer application, weedicide spraying, and all of that is usually done manually. And I'm sure my friend Justine from Hello Tractor will bear witness with me. Also, a lot of farmers have, you know, a lot of farmers have the experience a lot of issues trying to gain access to tractors and, you know, other farm mechanization equipment for their farms. So we thought that, you know, we are trying to come up with a seed planting agricultural robot. So that's when we started working on the MVP. Now, it's been really successful, and coincidentally too, I happen to be doing my my master's in artificial intelligence. So that was when I merged the idea of robotics and AI into how into farming in Africa. One of the things we noticed is that our robots are generally expensive, $250,000, $150,000, and they are mostly designed for foreign conditions, foreign farms, overseas, and all of that in Europe and in America. But in Africa, it leaves Africa left behind. So one of the things we did as part of the trajectory we're going through was that we thought it wise to. And as part of my master's thesis, I think I combined my master's thesis in addition to the startup I intended to also go through. And then we've developed this AI-powered agricultural robot called the GreenBot. Now, what happens? The GreenBot is it's a low-cost robot. It helps in planting, it helps in fertilizing, and it helps with also planting and fertilizing. And also what it does is that it has this crop recommendation system using AI. So what happens is that farmers, it is able to recommend suitable crops a farmer can cultivate on his farm based on the soil fertility parameters such as the NPK levels, soil nutrient levels, soil moisture content, pH levels. So it's trained with machine learning, and it helps farmers predict with high accuracy. Now it does this to help farmers increase maximum yield or have maximum yield. So if the machine is able to tell you, the farmer, to cultivate, let's say, soya bean, and then you cultivate soya bean based on the soil fertility parameters, then you are assured of a higher yield. So the robot solves the issue with farm mechanization or the issue with farm labor, as well as provide a crop recommendation system at a very low cost. Yeah, so I'm sure when we have other discussions concerning this whole aspect, I'll be in a position to give more details of my experience. So that is my path, starting from STEM education. But at the same time, we also still do the Agtech STEM education training, robotics training program in the schools. But this was something that was birthed out of that experience. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Frank. Thank you. This is very exciting. And actually, I did not know that Robotics came from Khalmax. So that's interesting to hear how that evolution has happened. So thank you for sharing. Yes, we'll have many more questions and conversations around how you are applying robotics, AI in your space for seed planting and fertilizing. So thank you for sharing that. I think we can go on next to have Uka to introduce himself again. The prompt is background and what your organization does in the space of agriculture. And we want to keep that within 2 to 3 minutes. Okay. And yes, speak slowly, as slow as possible with pauses in your sentences so it's easy to translate. Thank you.
All right. So nice to connect with each and every one of you. Thank you so much, Kennedy, for the invitation. I don't know, am I audible enough? Is the speed enough? Right. Thank you so much. I think first, thank you for the invite once again. So my name is Uka, and I am the CEO of Tribe Agric. Tribe Agric started in 2017, and the goal has been simple. Our vision is to build an Africa that feeds herself and people. And since 2017, we've been working with smallholder farmers, them access to finance, to technology-based advice, also to access to markets, premium markets. And the reason why we decided to do this is because of the identification of the problem rural farmers face. Input financing is one of it. We wanted to figure out how to use technology to bring farmers to access to quality input, right? And we also wanted to use technology to bring farmers to extension services to improve their yield. And also data we gather, leverage technology to bring farmers to access to premium markets. Because of the large amount of middlemen that exist in the space, the goal is to make sure that first, the farmers can be a what's it called now? Forefront, can play their goods will be sold. So And we've been able to do this with over 500,000 farmers. Our operations are in, we have 75% of our operations are in Nigeria, and the remaining 25% spread in Ghana and Kenya. And they are doing all of these with a device internally called an AOS. The AOS is, right, can I go on?
So, okay, I just want to confirm if you are on the English channel. So I can just, let me go on, move this back.
I guess I'll just pause for a while, right?
So can you see the screen? I have a snapshot of the, Zoom, the Zoom dashboard on the screen. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Oh, yes, I can.
Okay, so if
On
you click on the interpretation on your Zoom dashboard, you should be able to see English and French as audio
So what should I
channel options. Okay, so
do?
you should be on the English channel.
All right.
And maybe I can just use this opportunity to ask, I think Aisha and Arinze, maybe you're already on there. And I think Femi is not in there still. So all our panelists, please just be on the English channel so that our interpreter, DDR2, can hear you and interpret to French. Okay.
All right. So I've currently set it on the English channel. Is that fine now?
Yes, yes. As long as you're on the English channel, that should be fine. Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
so
hello?
please, you can go ahead.
I guess I can go on now, right?
Yes.
Can I go on now? Maybe just give me.
Yes, you can go now.
All right.
You can go now.
Okay, so I was saying earlier that we've been able to do all of this with over 500,000 farmers spread across Nigeria, Ghana, and Kenya. And we've done this with the aid of what we call a device we built internally called an AOS. The AOS is an agriculture operating system. The goal is to be able to automate the entire operation. We've been able to see a lot of successes so far. And the AOS is built into, there are three suites of the farmer or onboarding platform, which pretty much gets the farmer biodata to map the land, helps to give extension services to the farmers. So there's the inventory management system, pretty much at the point of harvest we gather the inventory that is brought to the warehouse. And also there is the trader. Trader pretty much links the goods the farmer sells on our platform to the off-takers we have. There's a fourth one, which is more like the financier. We link agents, people who want to participate in agriculture, in the sector, to financial institutions who are interested in funding them. So, so this is what we've done, and it's done with the team of the data team and a huge technology supervision within the team. You know, considering how fragmented agriculture is, it's pretty difficult to automate a number of things, especially in Africa. But we'll see. These are early days, and we've pretty much seen a lot of progress so far. Yeah. So that's just a snapshot on what we do at Thrive Agric. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Uka. Really interesting to hear about the agricultural operating system. That's definitely a very catchy name. So it's really cool. And we would like to maybe get a bit into what that entails and how that creates value for everyone, the in the agricultural value chain. So that's really exciting. Thank you. Can we have Aisha introduce yourself, please, again, with the prompt of what your background is and what you do in this space in agriculture today. And to just confirm that you are on the English channel interpretation so that we can hear you. Are you on the English?
I am on the English channel.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, please go ahead. It's good to see you.
Okay, great. Likewise. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. Just checking that my sound is fine because I am connecting to audio my earpiece. Okay,
Sound
great.
is good.
Okay, fantastic. My name is Aisha and I work with Farms to You. I lead strategy and operations at Farms to You, and we have the goal of becoming the tech-enabled strategic sourcing partner for FMCG and processing companies in Sub-Saharan Africa. What do I mean by strategic?
Please permit me to just pause you for a minute. Actually, it's a little muffled, a little hard to make out your words.
Is it better now?
It is better now, yes.
Okay. Apologies. I noticed that you said to speak slow, so I
Yes.
naturally speak faster. Maybe that's why. So I'll just try and
Awesome. You're doing great. Thank you.
take it slow. So Farms to You, I lead strategy and operations. At Farms to You, our vision is to become the strategic sourcing partner for FMCG and processing companies. What do I mean by that? Ensuring that sourcing of raw agricultural commodities is done in a more efficient manner. For traditional companies, so FMCGs, this is fast-moving moving consumer goods companies and processing companies, it's actually sometimes cheaper for them to import their raw agricultural commodities just because of how fragmented things like logistics and other challenges as well. And our goal is really to think about how do we integrate all those pieces that lead to, for instance, knowing where the source of produce is and enabling the logistics to actually facilitate transportation to those buyers. To put it into more context, Nestle, for instance, would have an order of 100,000 tons of maize for Q2 2023. But it would be very difficult for them to actually know where can I get that volume from. Where in Nigeria, for instance, there is no clear data to tell us how much maize is coming out of Saminaka, Kaduna every farming season. So it's being able to help support that strategic sourcing element for FMCG companies and processing companies, because without that raw agricultural commodity, they can't actually fund their own operations in terms of processing things like Milo, as you know, in both Nigeria and Ghana, or things like golden milk. And that's really the space that we're looking to play, being a tech-enabled strategic sourcing partner for FMCG. And yeah.
Yeah, just there's a comment about speaking more slowly in the chat. And so just try to slow down a little bit more. But yeah, you're going great. Very, very awesome.
Really trying my best.
I'm sure.
It's out of my comfort zone. But yeah, I think I'm at the tail end anyway. So that's what we do. I'm happy to go into more details later. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Aisha. Very interesting comments, actually. I think that at least in my learnings around agriculture, sourcing definitely is crucial to how the value chain works and how smallholder farmers perhaps particularly, or even all the players in agriculture can have more guaranteed value for their produce, if they can have more access to premium customers or premium off-takers. So great, great work. Thank you for describing. Thank you for being here. And we'll definitely go into more detail about how you do that and what the impact you're seeing in the industry from your work. So awesome. I'd like to have Arinze go on next. So please do the prompt is your background and what work you do in the agriculture space within 2 to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Absolutely. So hi, everyone. Kenneth Shugu, thanks for the invite. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. So my name is Arinze Eze. My background really is aviation and aerospace. I've been in the aviation industry for the last 26 years. So, but it just still feels like just yesterday. But about 7 years ago, I caught the entrepreneurial bug and I found the value of drone technologies really impacting the agriculture space. So in 2014, particularly, I moved back to Nigeria. Currently, I should say, I'm living out in Asia, but I moved back to Nigeria and I tried to start up a company out there. I got the vote of confidence when I got selected then in 2015 into 2016 by the Tony Elumelu Foundation. So at that time, I knew nothing about agriculture. So over the last 9 years, it's sort of been a very, very close, a very interesting sector that I've held close to my heart. So right now, being out in Asia, I've been working with one of the bigger agrochemical companies, trying to help them set up their drone center of excellence. And in that role, I've particularly been scouting around Southeast Asia, evaluating service providers that would be able to help farmers, targeting particularly smallholder farmers, developing a business model to apply crop protectants and stimulants on their farms, help them work out yield guarantees, pest and disease guarantees, and just make that the whole concept of drone use cases within the farming environment viable. So it's been a very interesting journey because I get to deal with the regulatory authorities of different countries. I get to see the culture and the impact the culture could have at the adaptation of technologies of that sort. And I've also been able to also see some of the key pain points that we ordinarily haven't been able to see as a large corporate organization. So that's mostly what my day-to-day activities has been out here in Asia. But I also have a side hustle of mine. I have a company that is DAI Orbitals. That one particularly is a bit more on the edges. So there we just, my focus is in optimizing navigation, guidance and control systems for space crafts. So it feels like it is a far cry from the space of agriculture, but it is still in the realm of robotics. So there's a lot that I'm learning in developing the company that helps in some of my contribution to utilizing drones and other forms of robotics for farmers in emerging markets, so Africa, Latin America, as well as here in Southeast Asia. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Arinze. Appreciate that. Really exciting to see how you are straddling different technologies and finding connections across all these areas. So that's really fascinating. Thank you for being here. So this is good. I think we might be missing one panelist. Unfortunately, the flying farmer is not here. Femi Adekoya, I believe. Right, Femi is not here. And so I would like to move us into our conversations. The first theme that I want us to talk about really is around the space of what is the state of agriculture in Africa. And my intent for us starting here is to lay a foundation of context before we start to talk about technology, right? Technology should serve context and create value in a particular context. And so we just want to have common knowledge on what is the agricultural context in Africa. And then from there, we can start to explore what are the technologies that aid to bring growth, development in the local context, okay? So I actually made a few slides to help to direct conversation. Well, the first question I'd like to pose to our panelists, and maybe you could have Uka and Aisha, if you'd like to maybe speak to some of this. I think that you might have more of the first-hand pulse on this question around what is the typical agricultural value chain of a produce. For example, let's take cassava, for example, right? What is the typical agricultural value chain that you're seeing? And, that was, what is the start of that value chain? What is the end of that value chain? What are the things in the middle? And that could give everyone a shared sense of understanding.
Sure. I mean, something like cassava, for instance, I suppose the term value chain is pretty broad. So I
wanted to maybe have conversation before I put on the slide, but maybe the slide could help to direct conversation. So let me just do that. So this is what I had. There are two pictures and there's probably too much content on them, but hopefully they could just be visuals that could perhaps help stimulate more shared understanding on maybe what we can have conversations around in terms of value chain.
Sure, that visual certainly helps. I mean, speaking to what is currently on the screen, it's so if we take production, for instance, it shows production as just one element. But you break down production, there's several elements in there. There are things like extension services. What are the best farming practices to adopt? This can be exacerbated with climate change, where the rains are more unpredictable, and in a region where you mostly are dependent on rain-fed agriculture, production has many facets to it. Alternatively, moving to something like inputs, and if I might perhaps be able to speak more on that. Inputs aren't limited to just seed, fertilizer, and tractor services like Tractor, who we also work with. Inputs include capital, so the cash that you would actually need for your primary production. It includes insurance to ensure that, multi-crop peril, you're protected against that. Area yields, you're protected against that. And that, also ties into things like climate change, where there's increased volatility, which also contributes to the increase in the cost of production. Our focus at Farms to You is really playing in that processing space. How do we help folks that are using raw agricultural commodities in their factories access high quality resource in a timely manner? Because it's a competitive play. A buyer, and by this I mean maybe like a Unilever or a Nestle, the competitive advantage they can have against the competitor most times boils down to who can procure in the most effective and cost optimal manner. Because if you're, for instance, buying, you're unable to, you placed an order for 100,000 tons of maize this week for your factory. If you're unable to access that in a timely manner, and you have fixed factory overhead costs, it means that you already have fixed costs in your quarterly plan that you're unable to cover by ensuring that those factories that are running, whether or not you have raw commodities, you're still going to incur that cost. So talking about a value chain like cassava, I mean, we don't have a lot of processing in cassava. It's all still very localized into things like amala and other types of flour. But that is starting to pick up, particularly with the wheats, the challenge with wheats, where lots of FMCG and processing companies are starting to look at alternative grains like sorghum, like cassava, that they can use in their processing so that they can fulfill, those production plans they have. I hope that gives a bit of flavor on the value chain, but the value chain is a very complex one. There are lots of moving parts, and that's why it's really important to build structures that integrate all those moving parts optimally.
Awesome. Yeah. Right. Even in trying to find visuals to discuss value chain, I found different ones. I have this two on the screen, but you can see that there's some overlap between them, but there's also slight distinctions between them. And so, yes, it's definitely a complex thing. It's interesting to hear that, okay, your organization operates mostly in the processing component and serving that part of the value chain. Yeah, so thanks for sharing those thoughts. Uka, do you have anything to share on, more broadly, what the agricultural value chain is? And you can speak to what's on the slide, or you can speak. You don't have to be constrained to what's on the slide. You can talk about from your experience as well.
All right. So I think I will just use what you have on the slide as a guide. I hope I'm not speaking so fast, right?
Slightly slower, it would be great. Yeah.
Okay. So when I was describing the challenges that rural farmers face, I think I'll just use rural smallholder farmers face, just to be a little bit specific how agriculture in Africa is. These are smallholders who largely plant maybe just about a hectare, under a hectare, or maximum about a hectare maximum of land, right? For these farmers, financing is usually a problem. How do they get access to input? And for them, getting access to the right input is a major challenge, right? So that gap has barely been solved in African agriculture, right? And how can we build systems? And then the reason is that one of the reasons these farmers face this is there is a lack of traceability, lack of digital identity. So financial institutions would not want to fund farmers because there is no digital identity for these farmers. And then it becomes difficult to trust them. So there needs to be a representative, representation that has a digital identity.
Right.
So in this,
Right.
we have positioned ourselves to be that representation. That is not, as much as that is not the ultimate solution, these farmers, just like everyone else, have to have a digital representation. In many cases, we usually used to be the first point of digital representation for the farmers. We have gone ahead to provide access to bank account numbers via BVN, that's bank verification numbers, right? To these farmers. We've done that for over 100,000 of them in rural communities, right? And the reason is simple. This serves as confidence for financial institutions to, as much as it's a gradual approach, to bank them through us. The goal eventually is that local and international financial institutions would bank the farmers directly, and we would just be a technology intermediary for this solution, right? But as I said during my introduction, this is the early day. This is how agriculture in Africa is supposed to look like if it's going to ever develop. Right? So we have, I think I'll speak for the Nigerian context. We have over 87 million. And then in Africa, we have about 500 million of that number. Right? So
Did you say
it would
87
mean that
million
digital identity has to.
Hello? Hello, Uka?
To input again. Access to quality inputs. You know, the first point I was mentioning was access to inputs before quality inputs. Access to quality input. Many times the farmers do not know how to determine it until after they planted, right? Extension services usually would be an education, usually would be the ways to determine that. And I see the role of technology playing that through extension workers. So we still have a very underdeveloped extension services activity in the agricultural sector in Nigeria. How can we use technology through digital systems to educate farmers in every, at every stage of production, right? Because in places like Mexico, for a stand of maize, for a hectare, most farmers produce as much as 14 metric tons, right? So the question is, how do we solve food security or the food crisis if, as opposed to an expected 14 metric tons, a farmer in Africa is producing barely 10% of that, right? So we've seen some successes on our end. So some farmers produce as much as 3 to 4 metric tons, and then sometimes we see as much as 6 metric tons. But this is not consistent with the entire African market. You see 1 metric ton, you see 2 metric tons. So I believe that technology can drive financial inclusion for the farmers. Technology can drive a scale up in education, right, where the farmers can be able to know what input is best for his seed at specific time. So I think I've used it to input and production. Then post-harvest loss. You notice that 40% of the farmers harvest gets destroyed because of either because of humidity or sometimes they don't have the best warehousing system to store their goods. So we need to be able to rethink warehouse as the approach for warehousing. So many times you notice that farmers store their goods because they cannot afford a lot of money, and they store their goods, right? So one of the things we've been able to do was to was to decentralize how to build a centralized warehousing system for the farmers, right? So at the end of the season, the farmers' goods are kept in temperature controlled system, right? So they can sell at still a premium price to off pickers, right? There are quite a number of things that technology can build in the different stages of the value chain. I think I'll just stop at that.
No, this is great, and I would like to have. We'll get to the discussion around how technology can address some of the great points that you're making around what are the pain points along the value chain. So that's great. I took notes of a couple of pain points that you and Aisha have described along the value chain. I don't know if anyone else on our panel, maybe Justine, Arinze, or Frank. I particularly asked Aisha and Uka to reflect on this question because I think that's really more what they do more broadly around the value chain. But I don't know if any one of you just would like to share one or two things in the context of the value chain, not really talking about technology specifically at this point, but just how your organization or the work you do fits into the value chain briefly.
Yeah, I'd love to go first on this, and I want to agree with Uka for one piece of case that number of financial institutions are not more readily able to finance farmers since they do not have a digital landscape whereby their track records can be available for financing and also for the purpose of their credit score. And I think now when we look at the value chain on a broader perspective, we find that there's a lot of loopholes under production and post-harvest handling. And so as we speak right now, I think there is a more broader global theme that is going around on what is the role of Africa in the global bread basket. And so it needs organizations to actually put themselves in the center of this. And that is why we are having products or innovation more centered and inclined towards this theme. For example, if I will speak about the Hello Chocolate perspective and context in this, is that a number of organizations or the banking sector in where I am from, that is in Nairobi, Kenya, and I was privileged to get to learn more about the wheat value chain in the Ethiopian market. There is financials normally don't put their finances on these farmers. But when you look at in technology, we normally see that there is more room at the bottom. So when we're working too hard to put things into the nanoscale. So when we come to agriculture, our bottom here is the agricultural sector. Agriculture is the backbone of all this. But again, if we cannot be able to put more finances, so Hello Chocolate, we are building a product we call a pay-as-you-go asset financing. So this is a model that is helping small-scale farmers, people living below the poverty scale of earning about $1 in a day, to get access to mechanization services through our pay-as-you-go asset financing. So we normally go and purchase assets. And from our platform, we're leveraging on tools like AI from Atlas AI to be able to go and look at the poverty index and of people in a given area. And through that, we're able to see that these individuals have the potential of production. And so we buy these assets, we give these assets to them, and then through our technology, we're able to monitor and see and monitor the productivity of these assets. So when we talk about this typical agricultural value chain, what they look like, then we need to focus more into the production and also post-harvest handling. There's a lot of wheat that is being produced, but we do not have a lot of technologies under the post-harvest handling. And now that is where the farmer loses a lot of money. So you find that the people who are becoming rich are not the farmers, but rather the individuals who are the brokers between the farmers and the guys handling the processing. So our main focus should be under production and post-harvest handling.
Right. I think that's very interesting perspective. Thanks for sharing that, Justin. Yeah, I know Hello Tractor focuses on the area of production and trying to provide more access to the core input for production, which is mechanization. And I'm seeing a common theme around access to financing as a primary bottleneck for how farmers can really scale, create more value, right? Very interesting. I have maybe just to push us on a little bit further. I have two images, and I feel like maybe we have already discussed some of these, and so maybe we will not dwell too much on them, but might be helpful to just point them out anyway. There's some data here just highlighting, for example, this one on agricultural productivity in Africa in comparison with the rest of the world. So you can see Sub-Saharan Africa in particular here. And how this value is computed is taking the economic value generated in farming, forestry, fishing, etc., and dividing that by the number of people involved in the work, right? So in other words, it's a proxy for the productivity of the people working in this sector across different regions of the world. And what we see is that Africa is really lagging behind. In other words, low productivity per person serving or active in agriculture. So something that Justine, you mentioned is that, yes, agriculture is the backbone of a lot of the sectors or economies in Africa, but apparently it is an inefficient or at least an unproductive backbone, right? So we have majority of people working in the agricultural sector, but working at a low productivity level. And I think that at least from my naive perspective, it looks like all we've talked about today so far on the value chain is really getting at that problem, either from the access to finance so that smallholder farmers can grow, or access to mechanization so that they can have higher crop yields, or it could be access to actually capturing value post-harvest through better practices and warehousing and whatnot, so they can actually have more crops being, going to the market. And so I think it's great. Our conversation is really awesome. I just wanted to show this out to help to build again context for us, and maybe if Arinze or Frank, if any of you want to maybe just share one or two thoughts around this, maybe synthesizing what we've discussed so far, maybe sharing anything that you're seeing from your work so far in capturing this issue around low productivity. And actually in relation to that also low crop yields, which is what is on the other graph. So not only low productivity per person, but as we can expect, low crop yields. Crop yield saying, okay, how much is produced per hectare used?
Yeah, if I may chime in really quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that okay? Okay. So
yeah, really, you can go first.
Yeah, just really quick. Just to buttress a point that Oka had made on post-harvest when he compared Mexico to Nigeria with 14 metric tons to less than 10% of that by farmers in Africa. Clearly, this graph is heavily it shows the challenges that we have within Africa. In Nigeria, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, we kind of tried to do an estimate if we were to bring Nigeria's mechanization up to standard, up to the global standard, we'll need well over 780,000 tractors from Hello Tractor. And at that time, that was in itself just absolutely impossible to achieve. This was about 4 or 5 years ago. So I don't think that the number that we had then has changed that much. So for productivity to get to the global standard, we definitely need a variety of technologies that are designed specifically for the African market. Now, if we understand the African market, we also know that the farm sizes, I think somebody else alluded to this, is about 0.8 hectares per farmer. So, and they're heavily fragmented. So if we try to pull technologies and replicate what we see in the West, we'll find that, we wouldn't be able to achieve the food security that Africa needs and so forth. So to these two graphs, I think we have opportunity to really look at a variety of technologies that we could be adapting to the within the African context to really boost our productivity. So some of them being, in some cases, lower power, like 25 horsepower tractors, all the way up to satellite imagery for data collection. And to the previous slide that you had, I wanted to make one point there on the input side, if that's okay, right? So inputs, if we could start really looking at, I'm not an agronomist and I'm not necessarily an expert in this space, but improving the seeds, the inputs that the farmers have right off the bat, where they can become more disease resistant, more stress resistant, things that are seeds that are within the African climate that can withstand some of the stresses there. I think that might reduce the capital needed for farmers through production to post-harvest. And again, to that 40% that Uka mentioned of losses that farmers face the post-harvest, there's a lot of things that we could do there to solve the logistics issues where right after harvest, these products can make it right to the table of the consumers. And these things are, I wouldn't say easily implementable, but I think there are different avenues that we can actually look at once we get into the technology side to discuss potentials there.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, great stats there around the gap, the mechanization gap for Nigeria, 780,000 tractors. That is a tall order. Interesting, a very interesting thoughts, Arinze. Thank you for sharing. Frank, do you have things
I would like to contribute to what my friend Arinze said. Funny enough, I also, as part of my master's thesis, our topic. Can you please move to the next slide?
Okay.
So I think this topic is very interesting because it's something I did on my master's thesis, how AI-powered agricultural robots can help farmers increase crop productivity, yet do so in a more affordable way. And part of the market research we conducted in most of the farms and the farming communities, I'll speak maybe more specifically in terms of Ghana. There are several of these problems, and one of the things we realized is that a lot of the problems are nested together. One leads to the other leads to another. So you find yourself going in a loop, because definitely, but one of the things we realized, we identified at least about 3 of these major problems. Some of them are external, that have nothing to do with the farmers. For example, something like the exchange rate, the war in Ukraine. Now, one of the things we identified it affected the availability or the cost of fertilizer. This was when we engaged the farmers, spoke to a few farmer-based organizations. Now, if you're a farmer and this happens and you have to spend about twice, I think the cost of fertilizer, the cost of fuel for fueling most of the farm machinery doubled in this period, especially the COVID lockdown period, and as well as the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, it makes the cost of farming very expensive. In the terms of a local farmer who is just concerned about feeding himself and getting some amount of revenue at the end of the day. So when we engage these farmers, I even have some video interviews of some other, news agencies that conducted with some farmers. And a lot of farmers said, look, they are ready to reduce their crop production rate because of the high cost of farming. One of the issues is farm mechanization, the cost of repair works on tractors and planters, and cost of fueling farm machinery. Now, for those who are, I'm sure the Hello Tractor will be very much aware. For example, if someone who has a tractor is in the city, he has to transport the tractor to the local villages and the rural areas. He has to buy fuel and then transport it to this place. This is probably hundreds of kilometers and miles. Now, the question is, who buys the fuel? Now, if fuel prices have increased in this situation, sorry if I'm speaking a bit fast, but if fuel prices have increased in this situation, definitely he's going to factor it into the tractor rentals, and then the farmer has to incur this cost. So I think it's a very broad topic in terms of the things that affect farmers' productivity. So part of my research was that, if the cost of repairing tractors, the cost of fuel, the cost of probably importing, the exchange rate, because mind you, if you are buying some of this machinery from outside the country and then you are bringing it into Africa, in Africa like this, our exchange rate, that's the CD, has depreciated about 50% to $1 in the last 12 months. So which means that if you were buying something, you have to pay almost twice of that to get the same thing back if you were importing some of these items. So that's what actually, in a nutshell, that's what actually gave us the idea to come up with the agricultural robots. With the notion, the mindset is that robots, they are expensive. Farmers cannot use it. It's too this. It's way bored. It doesn't fit into the farming system in Africa. A lot of the farmers are illiterate. They don't know how to use. And then we thought that, okay, if the robots are electric powered or solar powered, then you've done away with the cost of fuel. So definitely the cost of farming has been brought low. Secondly, if the robots can be transportable from one community to the other, you don't need to really fuel this machinery across regions. That is going to also incur costs. So that is what I also have to say based on my experience on the causes of low productivity on mini farms. It's just that in a nutshell, the cost of farming is just too high, and based on both internal factors and mostly external factors. So the solutions that we bring on the table must find a way to avoid all these, problems in terms of costs. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Frank. And I'm starting to see questions coming in the chat. So thank you. Keep bringing questions in the chat. We'll get to them as we go along. So we've had great conversation around getting a good sense of the state of agriculture in Africa. Thank you to all our guests, all our panelists, for the great statistics that just helps to give us ideas, concrete ideas around the hurdles. But now I'd like us to segue into discussing the potential and the capacity for technology to allow us to leapfrog or to address or at least mitigate some of this challenges that we have described through our value chain. Okay, so all the way from input through to food on the table for Africans all across the continent. How can we apply technology in novel, contextualized ways that actually creates value for everyone along the value chain. Okay, and more primarily, our interest is in robotic technology, but I don't want us to, again, constrain ourselves to one type of technology, because this problem is multifaceted. We would need to have a combination of technologies to solve the problem, right? And so we would like to just maybe now talk around how, maybe first of all, I'd like to just hear from panelists who are deep in the space. What technologies is your company applying to help to address some of the systemic, internal or external challenges that we've described throughout the value chain, right? So from sourcing inputs through to improving productivity on the farm, to securing post-harvest produce, all the way to storage and distribution. What ways are you applying technology broadly? And if you're applying robotics technology specifically, what ways are you doing that? All right, so maybe I'll call maybe Uka, if you want to start, just to share with us a little bit of how Thrive Agric is applying technology to mitigate some of these challenges that we have addressed. Uka, are you there? Okay, maybe while he's hopefully coming online, Aisha, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I can chime in here. I mean, there's a lot of potential when it comes to technology, scaling our agricultural prospects, which I am optimistic about. We're optimistic about the future of agriculture. Maybe a slight segue before us answering the technology question specifically. If we look at how agriculture has been conducted in North America, much of Western Europe, where you have hundreds of thousands of acres, you have excessive spraying of fertilizer, pesticides, you have heavy machinery and tractors that have led to soil erosion. You start to appreciate how farming is done in sub-Saharan Africa, in Latin America, where there's a practice of smallholding and emerging commercial farmers, right, where farming is done in a way that is better for the environment. And I think the use of technology can help us maintain that manner of farming. Yes, we haven't kept up as a region in response to the comments in the chat. We might not have kept up with the North America and Western Europe manner of farming, which we can now see is bad for the environment. It's much more harmful. So I think technology can provide that bridge for us to maintain how farmers grow in a sustainable manner, growing in clusters, practicing things like crop rotation, top cover, which is something that has been passed on generationally, but it's not something that is adopted in commercial farming. How do we use technology? We use technology like web-based platforms to connect the production sources to our enterprise buyers like FMCGs, processing companies. Technology allows you to scale quicker. It allows you to access economies of scale and economies of scope. I try to stay away from using fancy terms because in a world of ChatGPT, everyone wants to talk about, oh, I'm using AI, I'm using AI. What really is AI? Do you actually have enough training data for you to actually convert that to AI? But one thing that we have done from the early days is how to improve decision making, how to use predictive analytics to guide our buyers to better plan, okay, I can get 100,000 tons of maize from this location at this time. Mobile phones are becoming cheaper, where you can now get a $50 smartphone. Internet connectivity is becoming more accessible. So there are lots of external trends that are creating for a more tech-driven future. But I think it's still going to be gradual. I don't think, at least in Nigeria and Kenya, we're at that stage of heavy use of robotics. I think before we can have that conversation, we need to even talk about there being good internet connectivity in this area. We have operations in Nigeria and Kenya has much better energy and internet connectivity than Nigeria. So I think in as much as there are opportunities, we have to be realistic about what we are seeing in the market that we operate in and not trying to fly before you can walk. It's a gradual step. So I think that'll be my feedback.
Thank you, Aisha. Appreciate those comments. And I think particularly interesting was your comment around how the West has very high productivity, but that is at a cost of less sustainable practices that has adverse effects on the environment. And perhaps Africa, due to lower levels of mechanization and aggressive application of technology, are still in the sort of sustainable space, but we're grappling with low productivity and how to find a happy medium between both. So we're not copying exactly what's happening in the West, but we are leveraging what works there perhaps to increase our productivity. Thank you for that comment. And I think your other comment actually about whether the African agricultural space is ripe for automation is definitely a question that that has been on my mind for a lot. I'm a roboticist by training, and as they say, to a carpenter with a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And so when I think about societal challenges, I tend to lean more towards my background and things I know. Say, okay, how can we automate? How can we automate? And that may or may not always be the best solution. So I appreciate you calling that out, at least from your perspective, what you're seeing in the market. But I also recognize that there might be different perspectives on that based on what other people are seeing in the market. I think that's an interesting contrast that we can discuss and learn from. I think that Ukay might not be here, so it would have been great to get his perspective around what Thrive Agric, his company, does in this space. But perhaps maybe we can have Justine. Do you want to share a bit more, maybe particularly around what kinds of technology Hello Tractor leverages to help improve anything along the value chain, the agricultural value chain?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity once again. So actually, our model at Hello Tractor, first our solution begins with a telematic device. that we fit on agricultural machinery. So I'm talking about tractors in this case scenario. So with this telematics, we're able to collect GPS data points and other incentives from the tractor mechanical systems, either using digital outputs or analog outputs and digital inputs, so that at the long run, we're able to analyze this using the algorithms we've already set in place, so that we can help people who are owning these agricultural machineries to be able to monitor them, where they're going, and know the amount of work they have done, what amount of fuel have they been able to utilize on a given day, how much kilometers have the assets moved, and more importantly, we also inclined to providing solutions to the OEMs on in terms of fleet management and also in after-sale market tracking through the Halo Tracker technology. But now we're also incorporating AI, since now we're able to get to monitor and know the GPS location or the location of each and every asset in space. We can be able now to leverage on Atlas AI's rich data sets that we talk over the social living indices of people, whereby we can be able to fully identify with the models we have where there is a demand of agricultural machineries. And you see, when you display the graphs, and we could be able to see the difference between Africa and other Asian countries to the west, then it's a question of technology, the levels of technology. And I agree with one of the panelists who said that we really need the machinery that are equipped for the African market. So the question of the African market is what has not been put into place. Accessing agricultural machineries is quite expensive. And if we can have something fully tailored for our African markets, then access to mechanization services can be easier, because a number of individuals are not able to access to these services because of the underlying cost that they have to incur. We see a lot of issues coming about the price of fuel, the living standards are going high, and also it means that the access to mechanization services is also going high. But now again, Halo Tractor, from our equipment sharing platform and the AI that we are using, we can be able to fully identify areas where there is need for tractor services, so that if we have a cluster of tractors in a given area, we can confidently use what you call the route optimization and tell them, hey, we have identified there is demand in this, and we predict that in this area there's going to be demand in the next coming few weeks. So you can use this part for you to be able to channel your assets or your tractors and deploy them to these areas where there's going to be demand. And at the same time, when now we look at the financing bit of it, because we're talking about our role in the technology space and how we're using our technology to also impact other people and also to increase mechanization and production in agriculture. So we're using this still the same data sets of identifying demand, so that we can be able to deploy assets to those given areas. We are able to see from our databases and our cloud servers that, hey, we have a lot of traction in this area at this time, and we have individuals who might leverage on our assets that we are financing them to own. And then when these people check out these assets, they can go and work. And now from the telematics that we have on those assets, we're able to see how much work they've done on a given day, how much fuel that they consume. And now we can take a small bit of what the farmer has already made, so that they can repay back the loan that they owe Halo Tractor. And we use the same amount to purchase another tractor for someone else. And so we are using a more of a give model, so that once you're able to repay back your tractor, someone else is also having access to the same tractor. And through this, we're able to increase, our main aim is to increase the number of tractors in the African market, so that a lot of cluster of people can be able to easily access to these mechanization services.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, Justine, because looking at the value chain that probably has the most, at least in my limited understanding, the most impact would be input, perhaps production, if I'm right in the assessment. Those two probably have the most impact on crop yield, right? In other words, how much yield, how much harvesting can we get from a given piece of land? Seems to me that mechanization certainly has a significant impact on that. Like you mentioned, cost, access to this mechanization services is a primary concern. And so it's really interesting to see how Tractors tries to do this sharing approach to essentially reduce the cost across all the people sharing the same asset. So that's, and using technology to manage that sharing platform. It's very, I think that's a very innovative approach. So thank you for sharing that. And I wonder if there are other ways that other technologies can leverage a similar approach to breaking down the cost barrier to technology that helps to improve productivity. So I know that Frank, your background, or maybe your area is in the ground agricultural space. That is, in other words, seed planting, fertilizing, and related agricultural processes, using robotics. And I think I want to get to that. But one thing that we haven't really discussed is the use of drones. I want to kind of get Arinze, if you could speak specifically to drone technology and where we're seeing how that could add value, and maybe talking a little bit about what are some of the constraints and limitations of adoption of that on the continent.
Sure. So just like you, I think that once we get into this space, with the hammer in my hand, everything looks like a nail too. But I do really believe that from what I've seen in Southeast Asia, and I think some of you on this panel may know this, Southeast Asia has long adopted drone technology, and it goes back to as far back as 1996 or even earlier in places like Japan and China for sure. I've had now the privilege of traveling through a lot of the countries here, from Vietnam, Indonesia, India, particularly China itself. And I've seen a lot of things that I saw in Nigeria, in Ogun State, in Lagos, in Enugu. Like we mentioned earlier on, the farmers' challenges on a day-to-day, waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning during the season and working on the farm fields till 6, 7 at night. It's the same sort of challenges that they see here, and they are quite complex. Now, so it's without saying from my point of view now, that intensifying mechanization is the only chance that a lot of these emerging markets have to be able to get their not just food security, but food production in general up to par with the rest of the world. We've done a lot of evaluation and research and review of China and what has happened with the industrialization over the last 15 to 20 years. And it's a very interesting story that I see a country like Nigeria really taking on, especially with this new revolution that we're in now with artificial intelligence, access to education. You go on YouTube, you can learn virtually any and everything. And robotics, believe it or not. So to the question that you asked, when I got into this space about 9 years ago, drone we used to purchase them at a unit cost of about $25,000. So a unit like what you see behind me used to be at that price point. Now you see them all over in Africa at a ridiculously lower cost of about $6,000 to $3,000. So I say that to say that the technology is getting cheaper. The adoption rate is also, albeit slow, but it's also becoming less of a spectacle, but more of an actual tool that farmers are beginning to see use cases for themselves. And again, to buttress the point made earlier, we have to start thinking to build for Africa by Africa to meet the African context. That's the long and short of it. So from just my honest take on where I see countries like Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Rwanda, even Zambia, Congo, our opportunity in being able to produce across the value chain is going to be adoption of technologies like drones, satellite imagery to do a lot of digital analytics to help farmers also in the financing aspect. When you're able to not only give bankers and insurance companies clear information of a farmer, both the farmer's history along with what he has as an asset, like his farm field and how well his soil is, it immediately resolves a lot of the other bottlenecks that we see in the whole value chain. So for drones, I'll just say that I strongly believe that in the next decade, we'll see more adoption of robotics. There are other forms of robotics. You just asked me about drones, clearly. So we'll see a lot more adoption of that, but in different forms, where you'll have drones that help in application of, I'll be very careful in saying this because we know, hopefully we'll talk a bit about sustainability as well, but application of enhancers and maybe protectants to a certain level for the crops and also the soil. But we'll also be able to do a whole lot more analytics. And if we can build out the ecosystem in Africa, I think that would be a game changer, because I've seen it here in Asia, and I think Africa could have the same.
No, I mean, I think that's definitely what we are hoping. And for a lot of our audience here, I want to maybe press on you, Arinze and Frank, if you can jump in as well on, yes, robotics has great potential to, through autonomy, to automate some of the tedious, error-prone, challenging processes on the production field in production on the farms, and maybe other components around more sustainable use or maybe more precise use of farm inputs like irrigation and fertilizer and even seeds and whatnot, weeding. So there's definitely clear value to releasing autonomy on the field. The question really is related to Justine's question, that how do we create the solutions that really fit the African market, right? How do we create the solutions that fit the African market from a technology standpoint? And at least from my perspective, it might have at least one component, which is accessibility from a financing perspective. And then maybe the second point might be accessibility from a maintenance and sustainability perspective, right? So how do we maintain your solar powered agricultural robots over time? Do we have the technical know-how for people on the farms to actually do that? Or are we kind of creating another beast that we need to find a solution to solve later on as we go along? So how do you guys reflect on this question around Robotics is awesome. It's being used in Southeast Asia, it's being used in the West, in Europe, or wherever. We want to use it in Africa, definitely. But how can we have a contextualized application of that here?
Okay. Am I supposed to answer that?
Please go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's a very good question, a very challenging question. These are some of the questions we asked ourselves when we were coming up with our first prototype, the MVP. One thing I've seen from my market research is, maybe I'll start specifically with Ghana. Farmers don't care about how novel the technology is. They are more interested in what works for them and how affordable it is.
Right.
So in as much as, yes, it's trendy for robots, for us to talk about robots,
Right.
must be some level of understanding in the sense that let's not just jump on the whole bandwagon and say, yeah, let's do robotics.
Right.
One of the things I have realized is that, you know, like even like the panelists that we have here, we all play our individual roles in the agricultural value chain that you have displayed in here. So for example, the Greenmatics, we are specifically an Agritech company. An organization like Hello Tractor is more of a farmer-based organization because they deal mostly with the farmers. So I believe strongly that the collaboration between these two organizations, just as a case study, let's say maybe Hello Tractor, we can have a conversation after this, you know, collaborating after this. But in the case where Hello Tractor, they are actually on the farms, they deal with the farmers firsthand. Then we actually provide the agricultural technology, because definitely we can't, or we don't have the resources to be on every farm at the same time. So these key collaborations between who is strong at which sector and who is more, you know, more experienced in another sector is very important. So we produce a robot. The idea or the concept behind Greenmatics is that we produce a robot, then we collaborate with farmer-based organizations. Hello Tractor, we also have Trotro Tractor in Ghana and other farmer-based organizations because they are the ones on the ground. Now, the thing is with the robots, yes, to produce a robot, but majority of the farmers who are going to use these robots are not educated. So now how is this accessible to them? Because if they can't use the machine, it becomes a problem. So what we do is that we train these farmer-based organizations, Hello Tractor, Trotro Tractor, all other organizations and other NGOs out there who deal with the farmers to use the device on the farms, maybe with the assistance of one of our technical team. So they go to the farms with one of our technical team, and then they take it across all the farms. If there's any technical fault, then the technical expertise from our organization would work on it. But definitely it's all incorporated with GPS and all of that, so that the whole system is monitored at a certain point. Now, one of the things we've also identified is that when we were building our robots, the Greenbots, is that it must be low cost, because if it's very expensive, definitely the farmers cannot afford it. So when we were doing the developmental process for it to be used in Africa, we considered using, you know, affordable, lightweight raw materials such as aluminum and all of that. You know, aluminum is really affordable, it's strong, it's also resistant to rust. We used it in the fabrication of the body of the robot. And for the MVP purpose, for what I used in my thesis, is a working model and all of that, we spent about 1,000 euros in the whole production of the AI-powered robots. And from our projections, we can use as much as at most 4,500 euros to 5,000 euros in the production of a commercial version of the robot. If you compare it, this is probably about 15 times lower than what is already on the market. So using, you know, cheap materials at the same time, durable materials such as aluminum and all other stuff in the fabrication of the production of the robot is very important in this affordability. Then I think one of the things too we need to understand is something like a feature like weed spraying or herbicide spraying. Using AI things like that. We have something like precision targeting of weeds. So you don't just spray the whole farm, but you actually use AI to target weeds and separate them from crops. Now, from that research, we've realized that farmers could save as much as 90% of the herbicides they buy using precision targeting of weeds. Okay. So adopting technologies like this will definitely make the farm, the whole cost in labor very, very minimal. Because we realize that, I'm wrapping up, but we realize that farmers spend as much as $85 per acre on farm labor tasks, such as seed planting, weedicide, spraying, and all of that. And in some cases, it's also very high. And also, one of the things we also believe is that when you have features such as, soil-based sensors to measure the pH of the soil, the NPK levels of the soil, you can actually use that using AI to have a prediction, a crop prediction model, like I said before, that can actually help farmers predict the best crop to cultivate based on the health or the soil fertility, based on the sensor readings from this device. And definitely, if a farmer is planting based on data, based on predictions from data using AI, definitely he's more like it's more possible that he will get a higher yield as compared to someone who just plants based on emotions, or based on not backed with data. So
Right.
definitely, I think in summary or in conclusion on all that I'm trying to say, I'm just trying to say that look, it's not the best for us to just jump on the wagon, but when we are adopting such technologies, we have to fix in a lot of parameters in there that can make it easily adaptable in Africa. So yeah, so that's basically the collaboration between the organizations in various parts of the value chain is very important.
Right. Thank you. I think that's great points. Much more to potentially on from that. But just with the interest of time, I would like to maybe just chip in one more thing before we kind of wrap up. There are a few questions and comments in the chat that I want us to respond to, but then even just finally, for the benefit of young people in the audience who are passionate about getting involved in this industry, in this space, I would like to have the panelists just think, and then I'll call on you to respond to a question on what skills and background and what advice in general can you give to young people who are interested in agricultural technology, or maybe specifically in robotics, if that's the area that you operate in this space. What skills, what backgrounds do you recommend, or do you advise, or just more broadly, what advice would you give to people who are interested in this area? Okay, but so that'll be our signing off remarks from everyone. I just wanted to give you a primer so you can think about that. But just to reflect on some of the questions in the chat, Chiamaka's question is, at what stage? I think the first question around the trends was somewhat discussed by Aisha, I think, and a few others, around how, okay, maybe not fully though, what actually impacted on the African productivity. I think the discussion there was that we weren't just keeping up with the mechanization trends, I guess. Maybe that might have been the primary thing there, and maybe other things around external factors like stability of government and society and support. So the other question is, at what stage of the value chain would application of AI and robotics make the most impact? I think that's a really good question. I don't know if anyone has like a 30-second response to that, synthesizing what we've discussed today, but really short, because we really want to move. Does anyone want to give like a 30-second response to that? I could do a synthesis, but I just wanted to open that to any of the.
So the question was, at what stage of the value chain would application of AI and robotics make the most impact? I think for Africa today, what we are really at the doorstep, for lack of a better term, of really the adoption of these new, more or less new technologies, and the pathway for us is digital transformation. So someone mentioned earlier about mobile phones.
Right.
If we start thinking in line on how we can onboard most of the farmers that we have in Africa and find a way to digitalize every farm field, that would be the first step to getting us to where we need to be able to then utilize AI and robotics to play.
No, I think that's totally right. Again, not focusing on robotics, but thinking about technology broadly, and yes, access to digital technology broadly, mobile phones, internet to help improve decision making. I think that's a core thing that Aisha mentioned. Providing improved decision making due to better information around farming and markets and whatnot. So I think that's certainly at the front end, and maybe at the midpoint, or maybe even the back end, seeing how we can leverage robotics. And I think this is probably different for different categories of the space, right? Smallholder farmers will probably need more of this digital inputs and then maybe commercial farmers will need much more mechanization and perhaps even more automation because they have the runway and the bandwidth to afford some of those technologies. And so I think, at least from what we're hearing from UCA around how a large percentage of farming is done at these rural smallholder space, but there actually are commercial farmers that contribute significantly to food production in continent, and they might have different needs. Professor Bolu's comment around, or question around how potentially what we're seeing in Nigeria, the Dangote refinery could help assist in fertilizer access. I think that's definitely a very exciting development. I'm sure Aisha or Uka, if we were here, could speak more to how that is creating more value for the entire value chain. Fertilizer is certainly a primary input for farming. Yes, I think that's certainly true. I'm not sure Aisha is here, so I think, sorry, yes, absolutely. Let's see, one more question, and just at the end there, are there specific technological and infrastructure barriers that hinder the adoption of agricultural robotics in Africa? Are there specific technological infrastructure? I think that's an interesting question. I don't know what, maybe you could have, oh, it's to Frank. Okay, so this is to Frank. All right, so Frank, I'd like you respond to that question, but please, with the interest of time, let's keep it as brief as possible. Maybe just going right to maybe just making a list if you have a list in your mind of things, but not describing too much because we can add tail end. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I at this stage, if it's in terms of infrastructure, I would say no, based on my experience. But I think it has to also do with the person or the farmer as a whole. If definitely you're not exposed to certain trends in technology, it becomes a problem. But if you are open to such technologies, as it stands now in Ghana, nothing really prevents you from adopting these technologies. That's the experience I've had in that space. I've not really encountered any farmer or any government policy that has prohibited that adoption of robots. But definitely, if we're dealing with the farmer as a person, then it's up to the farmer to decide on whether he wants that technology or not.
Right.
So, no.
Yeah, I think I could add one thing around there is, right, I don't think that this is a technology issue. The technology exists, like Arinze was talking about, all over the world, and it might just be an issue of access to it in the continent. But the other question about the general question on regulation and policy, I think that is true, at least from my little exposure to this space, particularly with aerial vehicles, in other words, drones and related things. Different parts of the continent have well-defined regulations around who can fly a drone, where can it be flown, what sort of certifications do you need, and sometimes, depending on where you're referring to on the continent, those things could be regulatory barriers to how much adoption there can be for drone technology, particularly because of how special it is and how it shares the airspace with critical infrastructure like airlines. Arinze, I don't know if you wanted to just add anything along those lines briefly.
Well, I think you just nailed it. I think there is ground robotics, just like Frank had alluded to. There are no specific regulations today, but that would prohibit you from using ground systems. However, don't be surprised, depending on what country, like Kenny had just mentioned, there may be development in regulations there. Aerial robotics shares the space with defense. Drones, that terminology itself had a bad rap during the wars with the US. So it kind of filtered through down to the commercialization that we're faced with today, that some countries have very tight regulations. It's happening a lot out here in Southeast Asia. And I've dealt with the NCAA in Nigeria. So we know there's always that tug of war back and forth. They see the use cases, but it's a struggle trying to figure out how that's going to be rolled into the airspace with other aerial vehicles as well. So yes, I think in general, in the aerial space, there are some regulations that we need to make sure that we are able to navigate around and work collectively to make sure that we respect the defense of different countries. And on the other hand, ground systems, we should try to exploit that as much as we can.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you, Arinze. So at this point, we'll just take final comments from our panelists. Again, with the prompt that I mentioned earlier, the prompt is, what advice would you give to young people interested in getting into agricultural technology or your niche area in particular? What skills, what background, what experiences are useful to help one be successful? And we can use that as closing remarks. So we can start with Justine.
Yeah, so actually what I can say is that Africa has a vast untapped agricultural potential with abundance of arable land, water resources, and a young and a growing population. So capitalizing on this potential will need investment, infrastructure, access to finance, research development, a lot of market linkages, and capacity building to unlock the sustainable agricultural growth, and more importantly, to create employment opportunities. And also, just for anybody who wants to tap into this agri-tech space, there's still considerable opportunities for great adoption of technology and innovation to enhance productivity, efficiency, and resilience in the African agriculture. And the bottom line of this is that there is still more room at the bottom, and there is space for each and everyone on the global table, whereby now we can sit and see that, hey, this is what Africa brings on the global breadbasket.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you. Arinze, do you want to just share closing remarks and advice to young people who are interested in this space?
Yes, I couldn't agree more with Justin. I think that Africa at this particular point in time, we have incredible talents. Samuel Oyefsi, who asked the last question that we have on there, is part of a very interesting group that I am working with. I hope to work with back in Nigeria. But the point is, education, STEM is at our grasp now. You have easy access to any kind of knowledge that you want to acquire. My main advice would be to look for problems that are beyond the scope of just the local issue that you find. And this thought may be a little bit controversial, but I think if you find a local problem, find ways now, because you have access to understand the rest of the world, to look for a much bigger problem, a problem that is bigger than yourself. Then start finding ways to whittle it down. In and around this whole AI and robotics, I think there's a lot of talents that are in Africa, and we can really impact the rest of the world, whether it's the West or the East. It will take collaborative efforts by different people working across the world, working together to solve a variety of problems. So that would be my advice. Look for big problems that are bigger than you think you can solve, and start slowly working your way through it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Frank, just closing remarks, and maybe mentioning briefly around what skills, what background has helped you, and you can advise to people who are interested in doing robotics like you do in agriculture to be successful.
Yeah, so I think basically it helps if you have a science background. I'll have to admit, it really helps if you have a science background, more like electronics, but definitely where there's a will, there's a way. If you have interest, you genuinely have interest in more specifically robotics, there are a lot of resources on YouTube, Khan Academy, all those places you can check out. And so it depends on how passionate you are to be in that field. But definitely I'll have to admit that if you have, some secondary school experience in science or electronics, or university experience in engineering, it does help. But definitely there are people who have done nothing in that field. They've done non-science courses in senior high and the university level, but yet have been able to move into that space.
Right.
So that's what I'd say. And then the final part too is when you are actually looking at, like I said before in what we're discussing, it's not enough to, robotics, AI is all trendy. So I find a lot of young people, just trying to jump on the whole train, just because a lot of people are talking about it. But definitely you have to identify, like my friend Arinze said, problems on a global level. And then you tailor it down, you break it down and crystallize a problem into something you can really solve. Don't just go, because you don't just go into robotics just for the fun of it and say, I want to go into robot. But I have to find a space that the robots that I have built can solve. So those are the things. Make sure you are solving a problem, because the problems in agriculture are massive. So make sure that whatever you do is realistically solving that problem. So that's all I have to say.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Let's stop sharing here. This has been a wonderful time to engage. I wanted to just say a big thank you to all our panelists again. Thank you for taking your time to be here. Also, big thank you to Khadija too, who has been helping us with translating the French, and hopefully that all went well. I lost track. Hopefully our French-speaking guests here enjoyed the conversation as much as I did, and the rest of us in the English track. This is hopefully an ongoing conversation. And so if you're passionate and interested in robotics, or robotics/agriculture. We would love to continue to have this conversation either through the Pan-African Robotics Competition, or we can explore ways to broaden this forum beyond today. So again, just thank you to our panelists again. For those of you who are still on the call, thank you for your time. And thank you for our guests and audience for your questions and for your presence. Thank you all so much. All right, well, all good things have an ending, and this is the ending for this one. So thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.